Hello, everybody. This is Jess from 3D Learning Experts, and you're listening to the LD Experts Podcast, the show for busy parents who want to help their kids with learning disabilities, or as I like to say, learning differences, go from surviving to thriving. Hello, everybody. Today, we have the special honor to talk with David Franklin, the founder of the Principal's Desk, who is an expert in school leadership. Welcome, David.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's such an honor to have you come and share with our audience your expertise about school and learning. And so you offer an amazing consultation and course program for educators. And
That's right.
Yeah, and so share with us how you got started with this program.
Yeah, so my journey is kind of like a long, interesting tale of trying to figure things out. But I started out as a teacher in Southern California, and then quickly went into school administration, and I led two different schools over 10 years, both at the primary and secondary level. And then decided I wanted to do something else. I was at the ripe old age of, I think, 38 after done 10 years in school leadership. And so I went into higher ed. I was a professor of education full-time for 3 years. I've been an adjunct professor actually for a total of 12, but I got into consulting. I thought I maybe could share out my experiences and what, at first it was what not to do, because I made every mistake under the sun multiple times, and then started to figure out okay, if I do things differently, maybe I'll be successful. And I truly was in the two schools that I was a part of, and just wanted to kind of share out some of those experiences with others. And it seemed to hit a nerve with some people, which is great. And so I started this Principal's Desk Facebook group that has over 200,000 educators in it from around the world. And it's, I get to talk to educators every day about, what's going on in their schools and their districts. And it's been great. It's been great.
So what is it that you usually counsel educators in?
Wow. These days it's everything under the sun. A lot of it is just with the influx of new teachers and just kind of starting to refigure out, what do we do with all these kids who, are really struggling, in a post-pandemic world? What do we do? And we're looking at, assessment scores and how can we change things up? So a lot of professional learning community work, a lot of school culture work, but just, general school leadership. What I'm seeing is that we have a lot of new principals that have been thrust into these positions because of a lot of turnover in education, and they don't necessarily have the background or the know-all to make it through. And what I see actually in my group is a lot of first and second year principals really struggling, and it's in their best interest and the school's best interest to prop them up, to give them that support they need. And for some reason, they're not getting it at the local level. So whatever I could do to help them out, hey, it betters our society in general. So, I'm here and available.
I didn't realize there was a lot of turnover in the administrative level as well as the teaching level.
Oh, yeah. That's teachers get the most press, and rightfully so. They're the ones with the kids, and the sheer numbers are a whole lot more than principals. But the latest statistics I have seen is that principals have a desire to leave the profession as well, between 25 and 50% of them within the next couple of years, which is a lot. And with that, again, you've got the influx of new principals coming in without the training in the background. And I consider myself, I didn't really have the training either when I stepped into a school leadership position at 28, but I was lucky and I had a wonderful mentor in my district. And what I'm finding is a lot of school leaders don't necessarily have that right now. And I get asked all the time for support and help and guidance. And again, whatever I can do to help, in whatever knowledge I can bestow on someone, again, what not to do. Hey, you know what? I'm here.
So what kind of training skills do principals have when they start their career in admin?
So, all of us were former teachers. And so I came into the admin position as a teacher. I knew all about teaching, or as much as I could know at that time in my career. But as far as just general management with our time, with communication, with navigating some of the tricky landscapes with, say, teacher unions or parent groups or political organizations, or just like regular, data analysis, not just at a classroom level, but on a school level. And a lot of the job can seem very overwhelming. One of the schools I was a principal at, I was the only credentialed person not in a classroom. So if anything happened outside of the classroom walls, I was the one dealing with it. Everyone else was, again, not certificated. And so it's just a lot that is thrust on your shoulders as a school leader. And sometimes it can be very overwhelming. And again, there's no one you can really turn to ask that's on campus that much here. That was one of the best pieces of advice I got. I don't know if I would call it advice, but it was kind of like a wake-up call, if you will. When I became a principal, I got on the phone and I called actually a mentor of mine who happened to be my principal when I was a teacher. And he said, do me a favor, look behind you. And so I did. I looked behind myself and he was like, do you see anybody there? And I said, well, no, of course not. He's like, yep, that's what it's like to be a principal. There's no, you're it at that school site. When I was a teacher or an assistant principal, there was always someone else that was there. But as a principal, it's you, and you've got to make some quick decisions that can impact a lot of people. And it's terrifying sometimes.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure on someone who doesn't have any previous experience with it.
Exactly.
And you mentioned that 25 to 50% of principals are looking to leave the industry. Is that because the school system is broken, or?
I think that's part of it. I think I think just the pandemic. I think just like with teachers, just educators just kind of thinking like, is this something that I want to do? For the next 20 years of my life. I think a lot of us during the pandemic came to the realization of that, if this could happen to our society where we are shut down, where kids are learning remotely for in some areas like in California for a full year, where they are home, it could happen again. And I think that terrifies a lot of educators because it was very challenging, difficult, traumatic, and still is for some educators as well. I know that there are a lot of teachers out there that are wearing masks in their classroom and very protective and scared. And that's a real thing. And so I think principals follow those same things. There was a lot thrust on their plates. Educators got blamed for a lot of things during the pandemic and that were way out of their control. And I think, again, people are just thinking, is this how I want to spend the next, 10, 15, 20 years of my life doing? And it's scary when you have this many people that are thinking about leaving the profession. And that is also what's telling me, hey, the system is, I don't know if I'd say it's fully broken, but it's definitely cracking in a lot of places. Absolutely.
And, my experience as a mother with children with learning challenges, to me, it felt quite broken.
Sure.
But I don't have kids in school anymore, and I wasn't aware of how much blame was placed on the educators during the pandemic. But that makes sense, because when my kids were in traditional school, I expected the school to do all the teaching and provide my children with all of their learning. Once I became a homeschool mom, it all became my responsibility. And, so my shift in thinking changed.
Right. And I think, and I had two kids that were in school during the pandemic. I mean, they were school age, they still are, but they were learning at the dining room table, remotely, while I was sitting there working. And I could say that their teachers were trying really hard to make it work, but they weren't necessarily given the tools to be successful. But then also, it was very different district to district. There were some districts and people that I was talking with that were telling me, wow, they pivoted on a dime, and that following Monday, kids were up and running with all their online learning tools, and they were set. And, we only had a couple days where it was a little rocky, just trying to figure out everything. But then we were smooth sailing. And I can tell you from my experience, we had the opposite. It took a long time to get things up and running. I think there was a lot of frustration with that. And then I think people who don't understand the education system put that blame solely on like, oh, my kid's teacher isn't ready for this. Well, their whole district was their teachers weren't given the tools. And so again, as we think ahead, it's like, okay, if this can happen once, it can happen again. Are we prepared? If this happened tomorrow, could we go online and it be, I don't think it would ever be a seamless transition, but would it be less painful, the second time around? I think that scares a lot of people. But I think that's where the blame game started to come in. It's like, teachers weren't given the tools. What are districts spending all this funding on? We saw the ESSER funds coming in, that emergency funding from the government. What is it being spent on? Is it being spent directly on teachers and preparing them for these types of situations? Are we going to infuse more technology? And then also, with students that have learning disabilities, and then also our English language learners, if this happens again, how do we ensure that their needs are being met? Because their needs are different and they're more significant, but we have a job to do. And how are we preparing ourselves for that? That's the bigger global picture. The micro picture is my kid's teacher is doing a good job. And I think that's when a lot of teachers got very frustrated with just everything that was happening.
And do you think that since they've already had to go through this once, if it were to happen again, they would be more prepared?
I think teachers would be more prepared. I just don't know if they'd all be willing to do it again.
Oh, really?
The folks that I talked to, it was very, well, again, like working from home seems very glamorous sometimes, and you can, work in your pajamas and everything. Teachers aren't like that for the most part. Teachers like to be in classrooms with kids, and they like the hustle and bustle. And, for me as a principal, I liked loud classrooms where like kids were learning with their hands and doing things and talking to one another. Teaching online is very quiet. You don't get that interaction. And again, the length that some teachers had to do this for, I don't know if they would stick around for it. And I wouldn't blame them either. It's hard. I teach online, but at the graduate level. So these are adults. And sometimes that's difficult. Imagine having 7-year-olds.
Right.
It's the task was unbelievable. Without, again, all the training and everything. And I think it took a lot out of some teachers, where if they're looking at it, doing it again, I don't think some of them would stick around. I think others would, but that's the big concern that I think some of us have moving forward is what happens if this happens again.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's a perspective that I hadn't even thought about. So thank you so much for going into that.
Sure.
that wasn't what we had talked about before either, but it just really struck a chord of curiosity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's get back to you and your company. And so what is your mission for your company?
My mission is just to provide that support for really any educator. It is called the Principal's Desk, and I've got a blog, and I've got a weekly newsletter subscription, and I've got a book coming out hopefully in about a year from now. It's supposed to be published November 2023. But really, it's just consulting, and I've been there, and that's kind of how I like to kind of share my experience. I've been there. I've made every mistake in the book. I've been called every name under the sun. But at the same time, both my schools had tremendous growth within 5 years. I was with each one for 5 years, and I don't attribute that to like what I did, but I do attribute it to how I approached it as a school leader and how I brought out the strengths of everyone on my campus so that we could succeed together. And so a lot of principals, like I said, they're really, novices with this kind of notion. How do you think conceptually about school improvement? And if I can provide that support, I do. And so the Principal's Desk came about with that. Like I said, we have over 200,000 educators in the Facebook group, but we have a whole website full of different services that all educators can tap into.
And will you share your website address for those that are just listening on a podcast?
Yeah, sure. You can go to www.principalsdesk.org, and you can find us all there. If you're on Facebook, the Principal's Desk Facebook group, you can request to join. And and you can always email me at david@theprincipalsdesk.org if you have any questions or want to talk more. I'm happy to chat with anyone.
Awesome. And so what does your service look like?
It's really tailored to the individual or the school. And so it's funny, I get asked that all the time. I got asked that this morning. What does it look like? Well, I like to learn more about the organization or the person, and I tailor it from there. And so everyone needs something a little different. And so if you go on the website, you don't necessarily see like, well, it's this price for this. It's kind of like how I approach teaching. It's like not every kid needs the same thing. Well, not every school leader or school needs the same type of PD. It's moved, we move it around a little bit, but I do individual one-on-one coaching with school leaders. But I can also come in and do full staff trainings on like professional learning communities, school culture, common formative assessments. And then what I like to do is take a school throughout a whole school year or longer, 2 years, and really see them through this change process here. So I like to be physically there with them. And then we do a lot of online work as well, because I physically can't be it'd be way too much travel and it wouldn't be cost prohibitive for everybody. But, we do Zoom calls and just check-ins. And again, I'm that extra person in the room that has that outside perspective that can look at things a little differently and provide some, encouragement or examples. So that again, we are working with our kids and our teachers and our families in the best way we can. And sometimes you just need that extra perspective, that extra person.
And do you go out physically at the beginning to see the school, or are you never physically there?
No, I like to go out. That's kind of how I like to start things out. Is I go out physically. I'm there. I spend a day. I get a sense of the culture. I get a sense of just what's happening with the school. If I don't do that up front, and sometimes I can't do that just because of different logistics. It's a little harder, but I spend a little bit more time online with them than I normally would, and really get to know the staff and the school leaders. I do a lot of surveying as well, so I get a really good picture about where they're currently at, to get that baseline, and then based again off of the conversations I've had before, where do you want to go? What do you hope to achieve? And so now, if I know where we're starting and where we're going, I can put a really comprehensive plan in place that can get them where they want to go.
And so, do you typically see significant changes after you've helped them restructure?
Typically, I do. I will say there's not every single time, because you have to implement these ideas. And I also tell schools and school leaders, like, make these your own. You don't have to copycat everything I'm giving you. In fact, I recommend you don't do that, but make it your own. And so a lot of the things that I do share with my schools, they're very tangible takeaways and something you can implement tomorrow. And so I like to have those kind of like short-term wins. And here's something you can do, and you'll have results within a week. And then here's some things, though, that this is going to take 6 months, or this is going to take the entire school year that we're going to have to work on. So we do a combination of both. And I would say if they're following the plan that I set for them close enough, they're going to see those results. But we do a lot of check-ins. And if they're not getting the results they were hoping for, we change it up. We're not dealing with inanimate objects. We're dealing with people. And so things change, and we check for understanding, and we let's make sure we're all on the right path together here. And if we're not, we switch it up and make some changes. I like to see them to their end goal. If it takes them a little longer to get there, I provide that service till we're done. I don't like to do like an end date. It's like, let's finish this up for you here. Because it took a little longer than we thought, but that's okay.
And what happens if a principal transitions out of the school while you're working with them?
It's happened because usually the payment is coming from the school or the district. I continue to work with the school, and so if there's a new principal coming in, I continue to work with that principal. If the principal who transitioned to another school or somewhere else wants to continue that work with me, I need to have a separate conversation with them. But since the again, the funding came from the school or school district, I honor that commitment.
And are the new principals usually receptive or really excited to have you there?
Most of the time, yes, because if you transfer in mid-year, it can be very scary. You could have been in a classroom on a Friday, and on Monday you're in the principal's office, with your name on the door, and that can be very terrifying. Even having district support there. And so if I'm kind of, again, that neutral party where I don't evaluate anybody. My whole desire is to make them successful, and I want to see them through this. And so, that's my only agenda, if you will. So if I can help them, and again, I'm just an outside person, they feel a little bit better with that, that I'm a little bit removed, but then they're very open and honest with me at the same time, because those conversations, they're just between me and that person. I don't report out to anybody else. Those are just one-on-ones. And I think that is where a lot of the great work on the one-on-one coaching comes in. It's like, we're going to have honest conversations, and I'm going to tell you everything and you tell me everything, because that's what's going to get us to move forward together. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like your services would be perfect for all schools when a new principal was coming in, because I'm thinking about the time when my kid's principal, he had health issues that came up very unexpectedly, and the new principal came in the middle of the year and had to, just try to pick up all the pieces. And people were angry, they were upset. And, obviously the previous principal couldn't help that he had health issues, and the new principal was trying to do his best.
Yeah, it's a lot of when new principals come in, it's a lot of like, let's throw the spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. It's like, you don't know what you don't know. And again, if you've got someone that's there who can guide you through this, it's just helpful. I mean, I was lucky and I had a great mentor, and she threw me into every situation. I was an assistant principal for 1 year, and she was my principal, and she threw me into every uncomfortable situation possible. But I knew she was always there if I needed her support and help. And she'd been a principal for 20, 25 years. And so she was a great asset to me. But a lot of principals don't have that. And so again, if I can provide that support, especially for new principals, like I just think, I know it would have made my life 1,000 times easier if I didn't have that support person who was literally down the hall from me.
So what tips do you have for new principals who can't have your services?
Yeah, I would say listen a lot. A lot of new principals want to come in, and I've written a blog on this. A lot of new principals want to come in and just put their stamp on things right away, make changes right away. Don't do that. Listen to people, really understand the school's culture, really understand who your teachers are, who your families are, what your community is all about. Do a lot of listening that first year. I think back on the 2 schools that I led, I didn't make any big changes those first years. I did a lot of listening. And so that when I came with my changes or suggestions, or I wanted to work with my leadership team, I had all the observations I needed to, and the knowledge, say like, hey, this is what I'm seeing. This has been our experience. Let's talk about how we can move this in a different direction. And the teachers appreciated that. Teachers can be very territorial, and rightfully so. I was a principal of elementary school, and I had some teachers at that school that had been there for 30 years. And so here comes this younger, person in here, and they're like, who's this guy? Like, what is he going to do? I actually was told I was the age of some of their own children, which I was, because I'd met them and we were the same age. And I needed to earn their trust, because they were looking at me like, this young kid doesn't know what he's doing. And there were some things they were right. I didn't know what I was doing. Other things I did. But I learned from them. I had to learn about the culture of the school. And then, after a year, we started to make some changes, and I earned their trust. So I was able to bring on some of these veteran teachers onto my team and almost be my evangelists, and going out there and saying, no, this is a great idea. Because some of the other teachers would listen to them more than they listened to me. And I was fine with that as long as they were listening. So don't make changes right away. Do a lot of listening, get to know your community, and be visible. A lot of new principals make the mistake of, they feel bogged down with work and answering emails and sitting in their office. I just walked around all day long. Schools have radios, or text me on my phone. I used to be in the parking lot in the morning, the parking lot in the afternoon. I was playing basketball at lunchtime with students, or I'd be in the cafeteria. Sometimes I was serving lunch, because we would have vacancies too. And just be visible, because you want those kids to go home and say, oh my goodness, guess what happened to me today? The principal played basketball with us at lunch. They talk about their teacher all the time. Everyone's teacher is like the most amazing person in the world. The principal never gets acknowledged at home. Once that child comes to us and like, oh, my principal came by my classroom today, and like we read a book together, or sat with me, at lunch, or whatever it is, that gets noticed at home. Again, you're building that positive reputation. You're building those positive relationships. Don't worry about so much, big sweeping things. Play basketball with the kids. They'll appreciate it.
That's great advice. I think it's great advice for anyone taking over a company, to listen before they try to start implementing changes.
Oh yeah, it'll backfire. It'll backfire big time, because you'll be accused of you don't understand how the culture of the school, and you don't.
And they don't, right? Yeah. And when you were talking about playing basketball, we lived in a small town in Texas, and our superintendent of the school district was out opening doors every morning at every one of the schools, because I had 3 kids in 3 different schools: elementary school, middle school, and high school. Well, high school, he wasn't necessarily opening doors, but he was still there greeting people. Yeah. And everyone had so much respect for him. I have never known the name of a superintendent at any other school district my kids have attended, but because he was so present, we all knew him. So we felt like we knew him so well.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really important, because I would guess that most parents out there cannot name the superintendent where their kids go. I'm willing to make that bet. I mean, I do, because I work in the field, but most parents can't. And right. I'm also willing to bet that a lot of parents can't name their child's principals either. I'm willing to put that out there as well. And so the more visible you can be, and it could be just, opening doors. Or I used to water the garden in the front of the school before the bell rang at the end of the day, because there were parents out there. And I was like, well, okay, I can water the front garden and I can talk to parents at the same time. And they want to see you doing those things. That's important to them. And again, you're having that FaceTime or building those relationships.
Well, that is amazing advice. And how about for teachers? What recommendations do you have for teachers?
Oh, wow. Teaching is one of those professions where it's such a personal field because everyone puts their own stamp on how they run their classroom. But for right now, building relationships, I mean, that's just the number one. It always has been, I think, more now than ever. Build relationships with the kids and their families. That's what's important. I have two kids. They're both in middle school right now. And so we're out of elementary where they just have the one teacher. So now they have 4 or 5 teachers. I'll be honest, I don't know all of my kids' teachers' names, which is terrible. I'm working education. But the ones who they love the most, I do know their names. And it's because those are the ones they talk about. You want to be that teacher that they talk about. When I ask my kids, how did school go today? Is that question you're not supposed to ask your kids anymore? Like, how was school or what'd you do? You're not supposed to ask anymore. I ask it every day. They'll tell me what happened in their favorite classes. I can say when I was a teacher, I wanted to be that teacher. And for a lot of my kids, I was that was the fun teacher who they wanted to talk about. Their parents knew me. Others, not so much. So get to build those relationships with their students, families, be positive, but also be targeted with your instruction as well. Know where your kids are at academically so you can best support them. That's hard once you get into the secondary because you might have 120, 150 kids. But the more you can understand where your kids are at academically, you can personalize that learning process to get them to their end goals. I used to make it a habit of mine at the elementary level. I had 600 kids or so at my elementary school, so not too big. And so we gave assessments primarily from second, third, fourth, and fifth grade. I made it a goal of mine to know where every kid was at and their assessments as a principal, which it was a lot of numbers to keep in my brain. But I also ran, since again, I was the only certificated person that was not in a classroom, I ran our intervention program. So I needed to know who I was pulling, and what they needed. But build those relationships. My intervention program wouldn't have worked at all if the kids didn't know me and know that Dr. Franklin wants us to do well.
And how do they build relationships these days? I mean, when my older kids were young, teachers could hug the kids. Now there's so much concern about, you don't want to seem inappropriate. And,
right.
And you don't want to say too much to parents or kids.
Yeah, it's it's funny because as a male teacher, I was always careful about that, and I worked with a lot of middle schoolers, and I was very careful on kind of how I was presenting myself. When I went to an elementary school, it's so different because the kids run up to you and they give you a hug, and I remember I was not expecting it when I first got there, but they just come up because they're kids. That's what they do.
Right.
And nowadays, I mean, especially in this post-COVID environment and things that are happening in schools, we are very careful on how we, act in front of our kids and how we present. It could be something as simple as, greeting students at the door when they walk into the classroom. One thing that I notice, and I tell a lot of school leaders this, is when you walk around the halls of your school, are your teachers smiling? Are you smiling? Are you acknowledging kids as they're walking to and from class? And saying hello, good morning, or hey, have a good night, or good luck on your baseball game, or whatever it is. You're showing that you care and you're acknowledging them. I've been at some schools where the adults will walk through and not acknowledge any of the kids. It's like they're invisible. That's one of the changes that I like to see at schools, and it makes a huge difference because kids aren't expecting their principal necessarily to say, hey, I know you got a drama performance tonight. Hey, good luck. Tell me about it tomorrow. And I had some kids look at me like, how do you know about that? And I would tell them I know everything. I'm the principal. I know everything about everybody. But it's just, it's in those little moments that they remember. And they usually did come back, be like, oh, I did so well, or this was the score of the game, because they want to tell you because they know you're taking an interest and they like that.
So that's great advice as well. You are a wealth of advice.
Like I said, I've been there, done that, and I've made every mistake, and so I know what not to do. And these are things that do work because again, I've been there.
And as a parent, a former teacher, and a former principal, what advice can you give parents?
Oh, being a parent is hard. It's my 2 kids drive me nuts, just like I know everyone's kids drive them nuts. I'm definitely, when I try to help my own kids with their work, with one kid, it goes well. With the other kid, it does not. Focus on your kids' well-being. we focus a lot on the academic piece, and academics are important. But are your kids happy? I'm thinking about, I help my kids with like their math homework, and math was not my strongest subject. It was more, my wife is much better at math than I am, but I'm the one who helps with, more of the homework. And I have to keep in mind, like, is my daughter going to become like some sort of like a mathematician, or like, is she ever going to, utilize some of this? Chances are no, based off of her personality and where she wants to go. So I don't sweat the small stuff. Okay, you don't understand, absolute value right now. I'm not gonna. It's okay. Are you happy? Are you, communicating with your teacher that you need help? So it's a lot of like just getting them to understand how to go through and be a student. That's one of the main things I see in a lot of kids lost during the pandemic, was how to be a student, how to advocate for yourself in class, saying, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Jones, whatever, I don't understand. Can you go over that once more time? Because online, they didn't necessarily have to do that. And so learn to be an advocate for your kid, but also give them the space to struggle and to figure things out on their own. As parents, we want to come in and swoop down and solve all of our kids' problems. A lot of the times I am guilty of that as well. But take a step back. We know your kids are not going to, they're going to be fine. You can let them struggle a little bit, figure things out on their own. They're going to be better in the long run for it. But it's hard. Hey, being a parent's hard. But don't sweat the small stuff. I that's something I have to keep telling myself that too, because I'll get super passionate about something, and then I have to take a step back and be like, this is really not a big deal. Let's go for some ice cream. Everything will be fine after ice cream.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for all of this. And do you have any final things you want to share with our audience?
Just, hey, if you're an educator listening to this, thank you for all that you have done. It's a tough world out there to be an educator right now. So thank you for sticking with it. And for all the parents that are out there, same thing, really. These are some challenging times, and just, stick with it, be a partner with your child's school. Let's work together, because this generation of kids that are out there right now, they're going to need all of us to support them. And so let's all be partners. But if there's anything that, I can be of support of here, you can visit me again, www.principalsdesk.org. And you can contact me through the website. And if there's anything that I can do, please reach out, let me know. I'd love to work with you.
Thank you so much, David. I appreciate you coming to share with us today and all of the great insight that you provided. It's wonderful.
Well, thank you for having me.